The war did not end with peace. It ended with an unnatural, heavy silence that settled over Europe in November 1918. Like smoke after a city burns. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns stopped firing. Soldiers on both sides lifted their heads from muddy trenches, not in celebration, but in disbelief. For 4 years, the world had known only explosions, screams, and the constant expectation of death. Now there was nothing. No cheers. No victory cries. Just men standing still, unsure of who they were without the war. Germany did not feel defeated. That was the first and most dangerous secret of the post-war world. Inside Germany, there were no enemy armies marching through Berlin. No foreign flags flying over the capital. The German army had not been pushed back to the heart of the country. In fact, many German soldiers returned home believing they had survived an honorable fight. They were told they were still standing when the politicians signed the armistice, and that belief, half-truth, half-lie, would become a wound that never healed. The Kaiser was gone. Wilhelm II fled into exile quietly, like a man slipping out of a burning house through the back door. His disappearance created a power vacuum filled with confusion, fear, and rage. The monarchy collapsed almost overnight, replaced by a fragile republic that few trusted and many despised. Streets, once filled with patriotic marches, now echoed with hunger riots, communist uprisings, and angry veterans who felt abandoned by the nation they had bled for. Here was the second secret. Germany did not lose the war. Only on the battlefield it lost it in whispers, secret meetings, and backroom negotiations. While soldiers froze and died at the front, politicians and generals were already planning how to shift blame. High-ranking military leaders quietly spread the idea that the army had been stabbed in the back by civilians, socialists, Jews, and politicians who signed the surrender. This lie was not shouted, it was planted, slowly, deliberately, like poison in the soil. Years later, it would grow into something monstrous. Across the border, the victors gathered to decide Germany's fate. The Paris Peace Conference was not a meeting of justice. It was a negotiation of revenge, disguised as diplomacy. France arrived with scars still fresh, its fields destroyed, its sons buried by the millions. Britain wanted stability, but also obedience. The United States spoke of fairness and peace, but lacked the will to enforce it. Germany, meanwhile, was not allowed to sit at the table. It could only wait outside the room while its future was decided without its voice. When the Treaty of Versailles was finally revealed, it felt less like an agreement and more like a public execution. Germany was forced to accept full responsibility for the war. Article 231, the War Guilt Clause. It was a single sentence, but it humiliated an entire nation. Reparations were demanded on a scale never seen before. Numbers so large they felt unreal, yet very real when factories closed and bread prices soared. Territories were taken away. The army was reduced to a shadow of its former self. Tanks banned. Aircraft forbidden. The navy dismantled. Germany was left alive, but stripped, weakened, and shamed. Here lies the third secret. The treaty was designed not to heal Europe, but to keep Germany permanently on its knees. The men who signed it knew it would fail. Some admitted it openly. They believed a broken Germany would remain quiet. Instead, it became angry, deeply, dangerously angry. German veterans returned to cities that no longer recognized them. Job's where-a-gone money was worthless. Families starved. While politicians argued, inflation turned savings into paper jokes overnight. A loaf of bread that cost 1 mark in the morning cost a wheelbarrow of marks by evening. People burned money to stay warm. Children played with stacks of cash because it was cheaper than toys. In cafes and beer halls, the same conversations repeated again and again. We were betrayed. We were humiliated. This was not a fair peace. These words spread faster than any army. They crossed class lines, age groups, and political beliefs. Left-wing radicals blamed capitalism. Right-wing nationalists blamed enemies within. Everyone blamed someone else. The most dangerous part was not the anger itself, it was the direction it was being quietly pointed. Foreign newspapers celebrated peace. German newspapers mourned dignity. Every mention of Versailles reopened the wound. Every payment demanded by France felt like salt poured into it. Every foreign soldier stationed on German soil felt like an insult that never ended. This was not the end of war. It was an intermission. The world believed it had punished Germany enough to ensure peace. In reality, it had taught an entire generation that peace was something imposed by force, not earned by justice. Children grew up hearing stories, not of defeat, but of betrayal, of a proud nation humiliated, of enemies who wanted Germany weak forever. And in the shadows of this broken republic, men were watching, listening, learning. They understood something the victors did not, that anger, when ignored, does not fade. It waits. The First World War ended on paper in 1918. But in Germany, something else was born that day, something fueled by shame, resentment, and the quiet belief that history had not finished its work. The guns were silent. But the storm was only beginning. Germany did not erupt all at once. Its anger simmered. In the months after the armistice, trains carried millions of soldiers back from the front. These men were not welcomed as heroes. There were no parades, no medals handed out in grand ceremonies. Instead, they stepped into cities filled with hunger, unemployment, and political chaos. Many still wore torn uniforms. Some were missing limbs. Others carried wounds no one could see. They had gone to war believing they were defending the future of their nation. They returned to a country that barely knew what its future was anymore. The new government, the Weimar Republic, was born weak. That was another secret rarely discussed. It was created not through strength or unity, but through desperation. The politicians who took power inherited a collapsing economy, a humiliated nation, and impossible demands from abroad. From the very beginning, the Republic was branded a traitor by its enemies and a failure by its own people. Behind closed doors, German generals rewrote history. They held meetings where blame was carefully reassigned. Official reports avoided admitting military failure. Instead, they emphasized shortages, civilian unrest, and political interference. Slowly, the idea spread that Germany's army had been undefeated in the field, that it was politicians who had surrendered too early. This myth was not accidental, it was encouraged. It protected the honor of the military and transferred public rage toward the civilian government. This was how anger gained a target. The streets told a different story. Workers marched with red flags, inspired by the Russian Revolution. Conservative militias formed in response, armed and violent. Street battles became common. Berlin, Munich, and other cities felt like war zones even after the war had supposedly ended. Assassinations, coups, and riots became part of daily life. Peace had arrived, but stability had not. One of the most overlooked truths of this period is how isolated Germany felt. Once a respected European power, it was now treated like a criminal nation. Foreign newspapers mocked it. Allied leaders spoke of it with suspicion. Even when Germany tried to cooperate, it was met with distrust. This constant rejection deepened the belief that the world wanted Germany to suffer not for what it had done, but for what it might become again. Economic pressure turned anger into desperation. Reparations payments crushed any chance of recovery. To meet demands, the government printed money. At first, it seemed harmless. Then inflation exploded. By 1923, the German mark was nearly worthless. Salaries were paid twice a day, so workers could rush to spend money before prices doubled again. Elderly citizens watched their life savings evaporate. Middle-class families fell into poverty almost overnight. This collapse shattered faith in democracy. People did not analyze economic theory. They felt humiliation in their stomachs and fear in their homes. And fear demands answers. When politicians failed to provide them, people looked elsewhere. To loud voices, simple explanations, and promises of restored pride. Another secret lay buried in the treaty itself. It planted resentment not only in Germany, but across Europe. Many Allied leaders privately admitted Versailles was too harsh. Some warned it would lead to another war, but political pressure demanded punishment, not balance. Peace was sold to voters as revenge, not reconciliation. Germany noticed every restriction became a reminder. Every inspection felt like surveillance. Every foreign demand felt like domination. Even small humiliations such as being forbidden from building certain weapons were magnified in the national psyche. Pride, once wounded, became obsession. Children growing up in this era learned history through bitterness. Schoolbooks emphasized loss and injustice. Veterans spoke of sacrifice without reward. Families whispered about betrayal at dinner tables. A collective memory was forming, one that did not accept defeat as final. The most dangerous thing about this period was not chaos, but clarity. Germany knew what it had lost: territory, honor, power, certainty. What it did not yet know was who would give it back. That uncertainty created space for radical ideas, extreme solutions, and leaders who understood how to turn pain into purpose. The world moved on, convinced it had closed the chapter on war. Germany did not. It was studying the past, nursing its wounds, and waiting for a voice that would say what millions already felt but could not yet fully articulate: that this peace was not the end, and that history could still be rewritten. The anger born at the end of World War I did not explode immediately. It gathered strength quietly, patiently, feeding on humiliation, fear, and broken promises. And somewhere in this fragile, furious nation, the seeds of another catastrophe were already taking root, and noticed by those who believed the war had truly ended.